Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in Part B of House Report number 114-569, offered by Mr. Westerman of Arkansas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 732, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise in support of my amendment for a budget-neutral increase in funding for Army surface-to-air missile systems. The Patriot Advanced Capability 3 Missile Segment Enhancement, or the MSE, is the next generation of the battle-proven PAC-3 interceptor for the Patriot Air Defense System. Along with its earlier generation PAC-3 interceptor, the Missile Segment Enhancement is the world's most capable air and missile defense missile. PAC-3 missiles are high-velocity interceptors that destroy incoming targets with direct body-to-body impact. This hit-to-kill impact produces a tremendous amount of energy that defeats tactical ballistic missiles carrying weapons of mass destruction and/or submunition payloads, cruise missiles, unmanned aerial vehicles, and aircraft. The MSE missile provides a 50% improvement in altitude and 100% improvement in range over earlier PAC-3 interceptors and are required to address advanced air and missile defense threats. MSE capability is in great demand across the deployed force. In fact, the MSE missiles have been on the Army's unfunded request top priorities list. Additional missiles have been on the Army UFR the past 2 years and have been funded by Congress. This amendment would allow approximately 20 new missiles to be purchased in FY17, which would put the total at 105 missiles, which is still below the FY15 and FY16 levels. If we add these additional 20 missiles, the unit cost of the missiles would go down as well because of the quantity of scale in the program. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. GARAMENDI.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for Texas. We would surely like to do what my colleague suggests. However, it does leave us rather vulnerable to terrorism. Terrorism that would be carried out by those who might want to get their hands on highly enriched uranium or other elements to either make a bomb or to create a dirty bomb. The money comes from a very, very important fund, a fund that the National Nuclear Security Agency uses to secure loose nukes and highly enriched uranium and other kinds of material that might be used in making a bomb. It would be wonderful if we could carry out what our colleague would like to do for the surface-to-air missiles. I mean, those are important, but don't take the money from this account. This account is extremely important in preventing the proliferation of nuclear materials, as well as how we need to convert those reactors around the world, including here in the United States, that are capable of producing plutonium and highly enriched uranium. So I don't have a problem with where the gentleman intends to augment the surface-to-air missile defense program, or the air-to-surface program, but rather from where he is taking the account. And I would suggest to the gentleman that we would be far better off finding a different place, one that has far less risk to us. The terrorists are out there. They're looking to get their hands on this kind of fissile material, and they will be able to do so unless we use the money in this program from the National Nuclear Security Agency, Atomic Agency, to secure these sites and materials. And with that, I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield as much time as you may consume to the gentleman from Alabama.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the chairman. I rise in support of the gentleman from Arkansas's amendment. The Army included Patriot MSC procurement as number 12 on its FY17 UFR list to, quote, mitigate critical shortfall in Army war reserve requirements, close quote. The ballistic missile threat from Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran, and North Korea is growing. We owe it to our men and women in uniform to give them the tools they need to defend themselves when we send them into harm's way. Now, I know that on the other side of the aisle, they look at every dollar that goes to defense nuclear nonproliferation budget as sacrosanct. But I note that the House Energy and Water Appropriations Mark also has skepticism about whether this technology is ready for prime time. As chairman of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, I urge the support of this amendment offered by the gentleman from Arkansas. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Fortenberry.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. The gentleman from Texas, thank you so much. Senator Mark Clerk, who used to be a member of this body, he told me a story a while back. He was a bomber pilot during the Bosnian War. And during that war, he literally carried a map in his hands. And there was a red circle drawn around a particular point in that map, and it said, do not bomb here. And what was there? Loose nuclear materials, unsecured, that could have been a disaster had we inadvertently struck that target. Loose nuclear materials are all around the world. And we have a very specialized program here called the Global Materials Security Initiative program that helps secure these materials, brings down the risk that they'll get into wrong hands, brings down the risk of a nuclear explosion, which is an absolutely critical national security priority, to as close to zero as possible. I know it's not the intention of the author of the amendment, my friend Mr. Westerman, to undermine this program. And in fact, I support your underlying intent of enhancing the surface-to-air missile program. But this is the wrong place to take this money from. The Department of State, the Department of Treasury, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Energy, as well as other agencies, are sharing in the multitask effort to try to have a multi-pronged effect on reducing the probability of a nuclear weapons explosion, reducing the probability of nuclear materials getting into the wrong hands to, again, to as close to zero as possible. That's why, as we move forward in looking at how to enhance important programs like my friend has raised, we should look for it in the right places and not undermine a critical aspect of our national security. Thank the gentleman from Texas for yielding.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
And Mr. Chairman, I would also like to commend the Materials Management Minimization Program for the work that they've done, but as was stated before, the House Energy and Water Appropriations Committee, and I quote them, said a significant portion of the highly enriched uranium minimization efforts going forward will involve multi-year research and development activities. To better align research and development related activities with resident expertise for managing such activities within the Office of Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation, the recommendation shifts funding responsibility for the development of fuel for high-performance research reactors and for demonstrating and commercially deploying domestic-based technologies for the production of the medical isotope MO99 to Defense Nuclear Proliferation Research and Development. Mr. Chairman, I believe this is the appropriate place to offset the funding for these additional missiles, and these missiles are critical to our nation's defense. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cooper.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman from Texas. I think most of us are very interested in supporting the MSA portion of this. I just worry about the offset. It's very important that we make sure we do not raid the non-proliferation account in order to pay for what may be a very worthy priority. You remember that Secretary of Defense Robert Gates didn't even allow an unfunded request to be transmitted to Congress. That removed a certain temptation from us. But we all know there are a number of these requests, and some of them should be funded. But to raid the nuclear safety account because that's basically what nonproliferation is. It's a very dangerous precedent. So I would urge the gentleman to reconsider. We hope to work on this amendment in conference. But this is not a piggy bank we're raiding. This is not a slush fund. This is an account that could keep America safe from a nuclear attack. So I would urge the gentleman, as he pursues his very worthy priorities, to not pursue an offset in this area. So I thank the gentleman. He's an excellent member, but I think that we should all be very aware of the importance of the non-proliferation account.
Time has expired. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Again, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to emphasize that even with these additional 20 missiles, we will still be below the numbers for FY15 and FY16. This is an unfunded request, high priority for the Army, and I encourage a positive vote on this amendment. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas.
I yield back, sir.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arkansas. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.